So welcome to this session at CactusForce. My name is Ian Gotts. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Elements.cloud. And just before Christmas, the Architects program launched a brand new foundational course called Business Process Mapping. And I'm delighted to say that I was involved in the development of that course. So this session is going to take you through the principles of the course and then give you a live process mapping workshop. And I'm going to do that with Ryan Reynolds, the actor you may know from Deadpool, but who's also the owner of Aviation Gin.
So business analysis is a critical part of the implementation lifecycle. It's important to understand what we're going to build to make sure we build the right thing. I've always said that the faster you go, the further you go in the wrong direction. And analysis makes sure that we understand exactly what the users need, not what they thought they wanted, which means we're building the right apps, which also means that we are then building the apps that they will then use, so therefore our adoption goes up. So business analysis, that is a really critical part of the overall life cycle. And you can see here, it's tied to feedback, user requirements, and user stories. And that set of information then goes into the build phase. So what I want to do is spend some time thinking about how we do live business process mapping and make that really effective so you're engaging your end users. So we think about where business process mapping comes in that analysis phase. We have requirements, statements of work, maybe feedback from end users. Those come in as raw requirements, and we really need to make sure we validate those and make sure that not only are the ones that they're suggesting correct, but also that there are other requirements they may have forgotten. And the best way of doing that is to map out the business process. Once we've done that, we can then build really crisp user stories and understand the implication of the changes to the org, which then we're passing that across to our development teams. So people have been mapping business processes for years, probably using flowcharts which cover the walls of boardrooms. But life has moved on. We've actually got some very different audiences. We've got end users, we've got developers, we've got the management, we've got auditors, if you're highly regulated, who need to look at these process maps. Secondly, they're going to be looked at online. So over the last 20 years, there's been a new standard called UPN, Universal Process Notation. And it's a standard, really easy to use, and you'll see it used in practice in a moment, but really easy to use and be understood by all of those different audiences. And it has a very simple model. You have inputs and outputs. In this case, non-sales issue is an input, and some outputs, a resolved issue or a new issue. The second is that every activity starts with a verb, in this case, resolve technical support request. And if you want to know who is involved or responsible, then underneath there is a resource, in this case, technical support. And one of the powers of UPN is it's hierarchical, which means that any process box can then drill down to the next level of detail, which means that very complex processes can still be described in very simple diagrams that everyone understands. So that corner is where there is a drill down. And if we need more information, maybe we can attach supporting information with that paperclip. So UPN has been around for about 20 years. It's not tied to any particular software application. You don't have to use Elements.cloud to map UPN diagrams. It's not tied to any particular implementation approach. You could use it for business improvement. Obviously, you can use it for implementing Salesforce better, but also it could be any other application such as Workday or ServiceNow. And there are huge benefits associated with using this UPN approach. And there'll be a link at the end to a number of resources. One of them is an article about simply the benefits of business analysis. So again, when you're trying to persuade your teams that you need to do this business process mapping exercise, and they're saying, well, why are we wasting our time doing that? Why don't we just go straight to building the application? Then there's some resources there that you can point at. For this process mapping exercise, we're going to take Ryan Reynolds' view of how the aviation gin process works. And I've done a bit of research on Ryan. Clearly, he's a very successful actor. The Proposal, a couple of Deadpools, and he's also made some very, very funny marketing videos. But he's the owner of Aviation Gin and has recently sold that to Diageo and has a long earn-out. So he has a vested interest in the success of Aviation Gin. So obviously, prior to the workshop, I've done a lot of research on that. I've also spent some time thinking about and looking at the aviation gin process. And also, it's important to do the research. So let's see how good it is. Cheers. Wow, that really is good. Right, let's get mapping. So let's hear from Ryan in his own words how the aviation gin process works.
You know, people come up to me all the time and they say, what makes aviation gin so delicious? Most of the time I run away because non-celebrities frighten me. But here is the answer.
It begins each morning at 4 a.m. The distillers of Aviation American Gin rise to greet the new day with 4 hours of silent meditation.
Fantastic. So let me stop you there and let's just define the first bit of the process. So prior to the workshop, I'd already created a process map inside Elements. I popped the Aviation Gin logo in there, and I put down here that I thought the output was going to be sales and earn out, and the beginning would be demand. But listening to Ryan, that things start at 4 a.m. and the first step here is the team meditate. So we can connect that. So that's the activity, they meditate. And you can add a resource, and it was I think they said the distillers, there we go. So I've already preloaded some of those resources in. So the distillers meditate. So we have an output there, and let's add an activity. So let's hear from Ryan what happens next.
From there, it's a quick scoot down to the grove. The citrus fruits are misted using only the tears of aviation's owner, me, Ryan Reynolds.
Right, perfect. So they scoot down to the grove. So this must be after 4 hours. And I can just drag that resource across. Right, so what I think I heard here is that we missed the citrus fruits using tears. Right, so that presumably is the distillers again are doing that. And the input from there must be, we must have some tears. So we've got tears coming in, and we're actually at the grove. So we must collect the tears, and I think they said they came from the owner, from Ryan. So let's go and add the resource. Owner, there we are, owner Ryan, we can add him. And presumably there must be some reason why we've got those tiers. So let's say it's because there was no Oscars. There we go. So now we have, they meditate, they scoot to the grove, they now miss the citrus fruits using the tiers, and we've now collected the tiers. So what happens next?
All of our botanicals are humanely caught, cage-free, and grain-fed. The reason some people don't drink gin is that strong juniper taste. So, after apologizing to each berry individually, we beat the living hell out of them, creating a smoother, more refined finish.
Let me pause you there for a moment. Let's work out what's happened there. So we said that we harvest the fruits, and who does that? Presumably not the distillers. Oh, so there aren't any pickers, so let's add that as a new resource. It's a human resource, there we are. So, and when's that ready? Presumably when they are ripe. And then we had a process there where we said we beat the berries. I wonder who does that. So let's add a resource there. Let's call those beaters, and we'll create a new resource for those. There we go. And this is when they have been picked. Fantastic. So we've now beaten the berries. So what happens next?
To ensure that heavenly taste, every bottle of aviation is ordained by the Unitarian Church of Fresno, California.
Okay, so we've just said we are, you just said that we ordain the bottles, and luckily we've already created But Ryan, I need to pause you for a moment there. We went from beating berries to having bottles already ready to be shipped. So I think there's a little bit of a process that's missed here. So maybe there's actually a process called actually make the gin. And presumably there's a process here called bottle the gin. So we now have beaten berries. We now have gin. And we now have bottled gin. Now, fortunately, there's another team who knows a bit more about making gin than probably Ryan does, who's already been mapping out the process for how we make gin. So instead of drilling down on this to get more detail, instead I'm going to import the process map that I know that they've already been creating. So instead of saying drill down new, I can see drill down import. And there's the make gin process. So I'm now going to import that, and I'm sure that the distillers are involved in making the gin, so we'll pop that one on there. And if we just roll over, we can see that there are some process diagrams already been built there by the distillers for exactly how they make the gin. Now, I could click there and we could drill down and have a look at that in more detail. So we can see here the process starts, finishes with gin, but it starts with citrus fruits, crushed berries, and mountain water rye. So those are, I don't see that at the higher level. I need to go back and make sure that we've got those other items on there. So let's just go back up. So what I heard here is that we also have water and rye coming in, but it feels like the citrus goes straight in there and they're not beaten. So it's only the berries that are beaten. So this is citrus fruits. And these are the berries, go that route. So again, the act of understanding a little bit more the lower levels gives us more input to make sure that that top level is correct. And obviously the output was correct, which is right. So we bottle the gin. We now bottle gin. We now have ordained bottles. So back to you, Ryan. What happens next?
And then, before it departs home, serenaded with the healing music of Sarah McLachlan.
So the next thing that happens is we serenade the bottles. And there is Sarah McLaughlin. So we'll add her. So then what? So back to you, Ryan.
Some might call this overkill, but the next time you visit your local mixologist and you murder that silky smooth aviation martini, well, who's the killer now, asshole? Aviation, an American original. Now owned by a Canadian.
Can I stop you there? I think we missed a couple of steps out. So presumably we need to now ship the gin, so those mixologists can do their magic. And let's add a resource on there. So there's no shippers, so let's put shippers on there as a resource. And that would be ready to ship. So that obviously gives us sales. So orders for gin need to come in. So presumably there are orders for the gin coming in from customers. And then we have a process here called earnout. I'm assuming that once we have been paid, so we need to be paid for orders, and what we need there is an order coming in and confirmation of receipt. Of shipment. And an order. And there's Ryan's earnout. So there is a very quick process. The numbers aren't quite lined up. So if we just right mouse click, we can say, get all the numbers lined up. So it goes 1, 2, 3, 4 correctly. We could even line up each of these diagram boxes so it's nice and neat and tidy. So we need to add a resource there. The bottlers. Just straighten that line up. Perfect. We now got a process here. Draft. And really we want to publish it so we've actually got some version control over it. So I can say let's make ready for release. Then we choose a release. So this was the workshop. So and I want to include not just this diagram, but also those lower levels, because I want to make sure that those are also signed off. So I've now said I want this to be released. And if I nip over into the application, the release page, I can then go and publish this. So here are just two diagrams, that top level diagram and the make gin one. So I'll hit publish. And it was successfully published. If I now go back to the diagram and do a refresh. So if we look now and look at the release tab, we can now see that we have a draft and a published version. So now we can start making changes, confident that we've got some version controller we can actually work out what has changed. So the act of mapping the process has given us a far better understanding for all of us, the distillers, the bottlers, the shippers. We've all got a consistent picture to understand how the aviation gin process works. So really valuable in terms of getting everybody on the same page. But the other reason that we were mapping the process was so that we could understand how to build a wellness app to track the health and well-being of the staff at Aviation Gin. So any of these activity boxes, I can right mouse click and then add a requirement. Now the requirements may already exist, or I can add new ones. So I can have a look in the list of requirements that are already there, and there's already a tag called wellness. So anything that's a requirement for wellness is tagged there. So we've got, understand the wellness, track meditation. The effectiveness of meditation probably comes later. An app to track wellness. So let's add all of those. We can see there, each of those different requirements has been added to that step. And you can see there at the being raised status. So all requirements inside Elements, you can manage them through a formal workflow. So let's think about beating the berries. That would be another area where we maybe want to track people's wellness. So maybe the effectiveness of meditation, maybe the wellness of staff. Oh, and understand anger management. There we go. There's a requirement there. And maybe at the making gin stage, we actually want to track maybe the wellness of staff, maybe how many sick days are taken. Maybe the stills need to be looked after 24/7, so maybe we need to track the extended working, the effective working hours. And again, we can put more information in there. I can tag it with wellness. So you can see we're working our way around this, the process, starting to identify the requirements, which we then can create user stories, and then that will help us build the application. The other powerful feature is that if I look at the highest level, I haven't clicked onto any activity box, and I'm looking at the tab here for requirements. If I roll over any one of those, this is the understanding the wellness of staff, you can see it lights up the particular processes that are impacted by that particular requirement. So you can see there, understanding the wellness of staff, there are 3 process steps there that are highlighted. So a really good way of visualizing the impact or the change associated with any particular requirement on a process. The other thing we can do is we can link this to Salesforce metadata. So these are either the new objects, the new Apex classes, the new page layouts, or it's the existing metadata inside Salesforce. So we can make that connection. So let's do that very quickly. So one of the things that Elements does is we can synchronize all the metadata in an org. And you can see here, this is synchronized, a number of managed packages, a number of custom objects. But if we go down to standard objects down here, and let's go and link the employee object. So there is the employee object. I copy that. I can then right mouse click and attach that to a number of different steps where we think it's important. So now if I go to any particular step, I can see that the employee object has been connected to that particular activity box. And it doesn't have to be just an object. It could be down at field level. It could be an Apex class. It could be I go down a bit further, it could be a particular page layout. It's the employee layout. Copy that. Right mouse click. So I can now see from this particular activity, beat the berries, there are particular layouts or particular objects or Apex classes or process builder workflows that are associated with that. So I'm starting to build up a picture here of exactly how we're going to implement this process. There may be some new objects. Now they don't exist in Salesforce yet, and I could go here and so maybe there's a new custom object, which is our meditation object. So I could right mouse click and say, create a proposed object. And this is the meditation. And we can create an API name. I've now created that inside this tree. And when that meditation object appears inside Salesforce with the same API name, we will then connect it. So we're not building that object inside Salesforce, we're simply creating a place where we can document it. It now means that I can now copy the link, right mouse click, and I've now started to document this particular object, even though it doesn't yet exist in Salesforce. As I said, once it gets created in Salesforce with the same API name, we'll then connect the two, and therefore this link will then go straight through to Salesforce. The last thing is that this process diagram can be used as training material and embedded inside Salesforce. So we said that the process diagrams were valuable because it got everyone on the same page. They were valuable because we could start to identify what changes we needed to make to applications or what new applications. But the third use was that we could use them as training material. So let's just look very quickly at how that works. So in our employee object, we went and linked that process called meditate to the employee object. If I click there and say, please show it in Lightning, that now makes that process diagram available to the employee object inside Salesforce. So I said that we can make those process diagrams available inside Salesforce. So you can see here already that diagram displayed inside a Lightning Web Component. We simply go to the page builder, drop in our Lightning Web Component and just paste in the ID of that diagram. And this is a live diagram. It is, you can navigate, you could drill down to the next level of detail. You could attach training material to any activity box and have it visible. So that's the first place that you can find it. The second is that we take over the help icon either on fields or in this case at the object level, and there is the link to that process diagram, again inside our dynamic window, with the ability to rate it, was it helpful or not, the ability to make comments, so we can start to try process improvement. And the third place where you can access those process diagrams, and again, this doesn't have to be inside Salesforce, you could be inside any app, inside Chrome is through our Chrome extension. Click there, and you can then search on any process diagrams you've made available for the search. And you can see here, let's click on the Make Gin process. And again, it's inside a dynamic window. I can navigate around, I could go up to the level above this, and I can rate it. So the importance of these process diagrams is, yes, understanding how we all operate to get us on the same page, yes, to build applications, but finally, we can use them as training material with very little extra effort, simply either making the link available to the Chrome extension or embedding inside a Lightning Web Component or linking it to an object. Suddenly that is available to all end users to understand how things work.
So the key takeaways from this session. The first is that there are business benefits in mapping out the processes. You're streamlining it, identifying quick wins, even before you start implementing the changes in Salesforce. In fact, you may identify some benefits and you don't even need to make any changes to Salesforce. The second is that using this live workshop approach is really effective and it's really quick. And you get the engagement of the end users. You even start the change management process. And this is a far, far more effective way than going through, taking notes, interviewing different users, then trying to combine those and then go back and get sign-off. All of that happens in the workshop. And the last point is that you see the power in aggregating all the assets, links from processes to requirements, to the user stories, to the Salesforce metadata, back to feedback, and to third-party documentation. So not only does that mean that when you start building the application, you've got great content and all the context, but also means that you're documenting your org. So the next time you go around the loop and start to do any more development, you already have documentation, which means that the risk of those changes has been lowered, and therefore you've got a better impact assessment. So there's a double win there. So we've combined some resources here. The first is the training course that's on the Partner Learning Camp, and there's a bit.ly code there, bit.ly.cta/bpm, and that's on the Partner Learning Camp, so you need to be a Salesforce partner to access that. If you're not a partner, then you can access the course, or at least a summary of the course, and that's at bit.ly/cta-bpm1. And again, if you've got any questions, any thoughts, some suggestions, please ping me an email. My email is there, ian@elements.cloud. So again, thank you so much for joining me on this live mapping workshop.